Welcome to this lesson on cloud computing. We want to have a look at a little bit more detail around what cloud computing is, what it isn't, and some of the uses and what makes it so powerful. So, what is the cloud and why is everyone so excited about it? Well, obviously, it's not really the clouds up in the sky. It's a metaphor in the sense that what we are talking about is that there are all these servers, hardware, where they are serving software and applications to people below, in a sense. So this sort of unseen space has these massive warehouses, these massive computing resources that hold applications and hold data. So in a way, it's like it's somewhere else. It's not quite with us, and so it's got this name that's been attached to it as cloud computing, that somehow we send our stuff up somewhere and it is magically stored, and applications and other things can come from there to us and we can use them. So that is the concept of the cloud, that we can see it from anywhere, we can access it from anywhere, and it's very powerful. So cloud computing is essentially the practice of accessing, utilizing, and delivering computer resources through cloud services. And essentially what that is saying is you can access these resources anywhere, anytime, on a pay-as-you-go pricing scheme. And this is what makes it particularly exciting, especially for organizations, that rather than a once-off payment where people buy their software and that's the end of the story, cloud computing is subscription-based, or often is subscription-based, where you pay on a monthly or an annual basis. Now, when we look at cloud computing, there are essentially three aspects to it and three ways in which it can be categorized. The one are the 5 essential characteristics that define something as being part of cloud computing. The second are the 3 service models, and then it is the 4 deployment models. So let's have a quick look at those. Right, the 5 essential characteristics of cloud computing. This is what makes something cloud, or considered to be part of the cloud and part of the cloud computing model. First, it's an on-demand service. It is like utility. It's like electricity or water. You turn the tap and you get access to whatever it is. So, for example, if you're making use of backup service, when you need it, it's there. If you're making use of Office 365 and say you're using Microsoft Word, their online service, when you need it, it's there. It's not tied to a specific piece of hardware or any specific place. You can access it whenever you want. The second essential characteristic of cloud computing is its shared resource pooling. And this is what really helps drive the prices down. So rather than everyone having to have powerful computers that host these things, all of them are hosted on a centralized or distributed centralized computers, a network of computers that the resources are all housed there. So huge computer farms, or huge farms where all of these things are stored, can now provide these resources to millions and millions of people. And obviously this helps make it more efficient and also helps improve on the costing. The third element is rapid elasticity. So what that basically means is you can increase the amount or decrease the amount that you use, much like water. So if you need a little bit, you just turn it on softly. If you need to have a hard shower, you turn it on hard. The same applies to the cloud model. So if you need more backup or storage space, you can easily improve that. If you require faster servers, you can easily change the servers that your software is stored on, and you can get more servers, you can get more memory, you can get more hard drives. All of these things can easily be increased or decreased. So this is obviously hugely beneficial to customers because they don't have to pay for things they don't want. In the past, if you needed to have your own hardware that would house your own software, you would have to try and think forward to the future. Well, what are we going to need in a year's time? So a 2, 4, or 5 terabit drive's okay now, but what about next year? What sort of computing power? How much RAM do we need? And so you'll try and buy planning ahead, and obviously you're always paying more because it's not everything you need at the moment. So with rapid elasticity, these services, and many of them can automatically change to needs. So if there's a sudden hit, for example, it's Black Friday and you're running some special promotion, or all of a sudden you need more computing resources, you can even have it that it automatically provides extra computing resources as and when they are needed. The next thing is it's a measured service, and it's like any utility company, like your water provider or whatever. They're not necessarily measuring water, obviously, but they are measuring what they're providing you. So they could be measuring in terms of the amount of storage. They could be measuring on the amount of time that you use. They could be measuring on the amount of CPU usage, etc., number of users. So the costing models tend to vary, and what is offered tends to vary. So they may say, right, you've got so much storage and you've got so much memory, but you only have this much CPU usage. And if you exceed that, you're going to have to go to another payment program. And then the fifth characteristic that is essential for cloud computing is that there is broad network access. And obviously this is very important. This means you can get to that water wherever you are. And it essentially is like the water system. You could turn on a tap anywhere at your house and you're going to get to the water. The same applies with the cloud model. Wherever you are, anyone in your organization who has now signed up, it's using the example of Office 365, doesn't really matter where they are. In fact, anywhere in the world can access those resources. So those are the 5 essential characteristics of cloud computing that help define what the cloud model is and what has made cloud computing so successful. Right, so now we come to look at what are called the cloud service models, and there are 3 of them. They are infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So let's start with software as a service. And this is essentially the consumer side. This is focused on consumers. This is the type of cloud that you probably are most likely to have met it up until this stage. So if you've made use of Google Drive, if you've made use of Dropbox, if you've made use of Office 365, anything like those are SaaS. They are software as a service. Those products are being provided by Google, by Microsoft, by others to you as the customer. And essentially, it's an app that is being deployed from the cloud that you can run anywhere. You can run on your mobile device, you can run on your laptop, your PC, whether it is a Mac, a Windows device, makes no difference. So that is software as a service, very popular. This is essentially what drove the cloud model to start with. The ability to now enable businesses that they don't have to go out and buy a piece of software that is installed on every single different machine and dealing with all the issues that come with that. Upgrading it every time it has to be upgraded, having to deal with machines that are the right specs to run the software, and on it goes. So SaaS is software as a service, and it's aimed at the consumer. The next cloud service model is PaaS, or platform as a service, and this is aimed at people who are involved in building software. And essentially, this is very popular for customers who and organizations who are trying to deploy applications or trying to create applications. You need development environments. You need certain database backends. You need certain development software, etc. And these platforms as a service allow you to have all of that available. So if you need to set up some database, online database system, you can have the storage for that. You can have the database installed for you. You can have all of the needs, the software that you need to develop it, all of that is stored by the cloud provider. And now it's really easy, but again, rather than having to have those databases set up on local servers and the software made available on everyone's local machines, all your developers, everyone who is involved in using that platform can simply get it from the cloud provider. That brings us to the third cloud service model, which is infrastructure as a service, and this is about hosting. And so hosting now is really where you're getting to the real infrastructure that sits beneath everything. This is the infrastructure on which the applications run. This is your operating system. This is your networks, your memory, the actual computers. So again, if all that someone requires is actual infrastructure, they may just go for infrastructure as a service. So you can actually buy the infrastructure you need. So we need so many CPUs with so much storage, with so much RAM, etc. And you can then install your own platform, your own software on top of that. So these are the different layers, from hosting to building to consuming, and companies can choose what they need. Often, as I said earlier, the consuming is the most popular, but obviously with companies involved in wanting to have their own software running, they may go for the hosting, or if they're involved in building and setting up their own environments, they may go for platform as a service. So those are the three cloud service models that are available. Well, what about how cloud is deployed? There are 4 deployment models. The most popular is our public cloud, and that's the one where you typically are coming into contact with all the time. So when you are using your Office 365, when you are using your Google Docs, you're using public cloud. Everyone has access to the same servers essentially, and those servers from those vendors provide you with the applications and the storage that you're looking for. The next level is your private cloud. This is where an organization basically sets up its own cloud computing facilities and resources on their own premises. It's exactly the same, it's just that it's kept private and it's only accessible by that organization. Community cloud is for communities. Essentially, it's the same as private, but rather than having the expense. So, for example, a group of hospitals may say, well, let us set up our own cloud, and this entire group can now access those resources. So essentially, it is the private cloud, but it's deployed in a slightly larger scale across a group of interested or connected people or organizations. And then lastly, there's the hybrid cloud, which is composed normally of 2 or more of those models that we've got there. Typically, it's a combination between public and private. So some of the applications would run on the private cloud, often your Office applications, etc., and then it'd be private cloud for the more sensitive applications. So those are the 4 cloud deployment models. So basically, cloud computing in English, it really is just a way of easily sharing and managing your data and also your application. So instead of having your own server and your own specific computer that needs to connect to that server and all of them need to be matched together, that's no longer necessary. Out in the cloud can sit the applications, can sit the platforms, can sit the infrastructure, and that can be accessed from any device anywhere. So as a result, cloud computing has become very popular. It's created all sorts of new apps and services that we never had. Not long ago, all backup was done on tapes. And now as a result, companies like Google Drive, like Dropbox, like Box, have very powerful synchronization and backup software. And so all sorts of new services have grown up around that. As the second point there talks about storage, backup, and recovery. It's brought all sorts of interesting ways of hosting, of having blogs online, of streaming audio and video. It's created exciting opportunities for delivering software on demand, and essentially also moving across to big data and being able to analyze data for patterns and make predictions. So lots of exciting opportunities in cloud computing. Very important to understand what cloud computing is not. It's not just a connected network. We mustn't get confused and think this is just a connected network. It's not traditional outsourcing. Traditional outsourcing is where content is developed or content is supported by other organizations. It's not just that. This is where your data and your apps and all your support is sitting in the cloud. And it's not an alternative to your internal IT. What's happened is the role of the of normal organizations to deliver IT has changed. Still, IT departments are obviously very important, but it's taken away some of the stress of having to handle some of the more mundane things. And it's not the same as just web services, because web services are slightly different. Web services are things that are providing you your internet connectivity. Right, so that's all, folks, on cloud computing. A little bit of an introduction. It's a up-and-coming field. Well, it's probably more than up-and-coming. It's up and it's right at the top of its game. Very important what's happening in cloud computing. The future of cloud computing and what's going to be possible is getting more and more exciting as the years go by. So that's the introduction to cloud computing.